Which of the following options depict the main idea of the passage? Now the passage is about the faulty thought that mental illness and creativity are related, the reality, the possible reality behind it, and how this thought is damaging the music industry. Let us look at the options. Option A. The idea of mental illness as a positive creative force is unhelpful to the people who suffer from it, and some of them claim it's damaging the music industry. Now this option is in line with the central idea of the passage and covers all the main points given in the passage. So option A is a possible good answer. Option B. Attitudes towards mental health while improving are still poor, and when it involves people making music we love, we tend to ignore it. Now, the passage does not talk about involving people making music we love. And also, it is incorrect because it does not talk of the troubled artist fallacy, which is the main idea of the passage. Option C. Glorifying the angsty artist leaves those suffering from mental illness more in the dark than ever. Now this option is very narrow in scope and it only covers one point that is mentioned in the passage. Option D. Music can work wonders as therapy for mental illness but is unhelpful to the people who suffer from it. Now the last line does talk of music therapy in relation to depression, but it does not say that music can actually work for them or not. So this option is factually incorrect as well, and hence the correct answer to this question is option A. Which of the following statements by a famous musician can substantiate the perspective that mental illness helps creativity? This is a further application type of question. The question asks us to identify those situations which are in line with the troubled artist fallacy. The fallacy is that people who suffer from mental illnesses are gifted and hence can create great works of art. Let us look at the options. Option A. The coming out of the depression is often the period of time where I can create the most. So this option talks of suffering and the suffering fueling the artist's work. Option B. I always have a desire to write out my depression, so I will make a song as catharsis. Now this option also states that suffering supports creativity. Option C. This option, high profile musicians' panic attacks and breakdowns help lift the stigma from mental illness. Now this option is about stigma related to the mental illness and it is not about the fallacy. Hence, options A and B are correct. This means option D is the correct answer to this question. How is the idea of mental illness as a creative force harmful to people in general? Let us look at the last three lines of the fifth paragraph of the passage. It says, I also think that there is a tormented genius link, particularly with people who have bipolar disorder. However, not everybody with mental illness can possibly be gifted artistically or musically. So it can make people who aren't gifted feel even less adequate and even more of a failure. Let us look at the options. We can see that option D is the most supported by these lines. That is, it makes those with the illnesses but not the artistic genius feel like a failure. The other options are not supported by the passage. The other options talk of bad behavior, mental illness as a byproduct of creative genius, and people with mental illness not being able to convert their creativity into success. So these options are not mentioned in the are not supported by the passage and are hence incorrect. Which of the following can be inferred from the given passage? Option A. It is not clear if there exists a connection between art and angst. The last line of the second paragraph it says, but does this connection between art and angst have any foundation? Now this line asks us the reason behind the connection between art and angst. It asks that does this connection really exist and what is the reason behind it? The author also goes on to talk cautiously about this issue and introduces the troubled art fallacy. The author does not conclude whether there is any actual connection between art and angst, even though there are points for it and against it. So option A can definitely be inferred. Option B, mental disorders as a byproduct of creative genius is a myth. Now the passage does not conclude that it is a myth. It simply says that it is possible for mental illness to exist even without creative genius. Option C, in most successful artists, the presence of a mental disorder is a likely result of their lifestyles. The passage does not talk of lifestyles at all as a reason for mental illness. Option D, ignoring mental disorders because it adds to creativity is a common occurrence. Now the passage does not support this option also. In fact, in the penultimate para, the author quotes Alana saying that she would rather give up her creativity than be ill. I would much rather never write another song if the trade-off was not to have my illness. So option D also cannot be inferred, and the correct answer to this question is option A. What can be inferred about Alana McArdle from the passage? Alana McArdle has been mentioned in the penultimate paragraph of the passage. Let us see the passage. So is the troubled artist fallacy damaging the music industry? Alana McArdle, formerly of Joanna Gruesome, believes so. It's a harmful trope that leads to ignorance and a lack of awareness of what mental illness actually is and what it can do to a person, she says. I went out with a guy who told me that I shouldn't be so resentful of my mental illness because it's allowed me to create some amazing art. But I think that's wrong, and I also think it's a very offensive stance to take. I would much rather never write another song if the trade-off was not to have my illness. Let us look at the options. Option A, she is an art prodigy. Now, we know that Alana writes songs, but we do not know whether she is a prodigy or not. So, option A cannot be right. Option B, she has suffered from mental illness. Now, in the passage, Alana talks of my mental illness. So, this option is definitely correct. Option C, she appreciates that her illness has allowed her to be creative. She talks of it as a offensive stance. So she definitely does not appreciate that her illness, definitely does not appreciate people thinking that her illness has allowed her to be creative. Option D, she does not like people commenting on her illness. Now the passage only states that she does not like people to think that her mental illness is okay because it allows her to be creative. We cannot infer on the basis of the given data that she does not like people commenting on her illness. So the correct answer to this question is option B. Which of the following can most likely be the view of Simon Proctor? Let us refer to the last line of the passage. It says, depression and anxiety in different ways have the effect of limiting someone's capacity for expression and reaching out towards the world. Says Simon Proctor, a program director at music therapy charity Nordorf Robbins, who has co-headed a paper on music therapy and depression. Let us look at the options. Option A, music therapy is a plausible remedy for depression. Now, we cannot infer that Simon believes that music therapy will work for depression. It is quite possible that the paper that he has co-authored concludes that music therapy works otherwise for mental illnesses but does not work in the cases of depression. So option A cannot be definitely inferred. Option B, depression can limit the ability to express oneself. Now this is clearly stated in the passage and hence is correct. Option C, mental illness is most definitely not a cause of creative genius. Now this option is also not present, this idea is also not presented in the passage in the context of Simon Proctor, and hence it will be incorrect. So the correct answer to this question is option B.